All right, and we are live. Whew, thanks for hanging out through our tech issues. Welcome so much. I'm very excited to have you here and present to you my friend Paulette Ensign. Paulette and I met in another group and have kind of on the periphery seen each other's work for quite some time, and had an opportunity to meet just this past year and really discover what each other does. And we both live inside the world of physical products, which is really exciting. And I love what Paulette does with her tips products and the kind of innovative thinking that happens behind this kind of product that's both creative, physical, and makes an impact on your business. I just love the intersection of all those, and I knew that all of you would love to hear from Paulette as well, and how she uses creative thinking really to shift a marketplace and be a disruptor inside this marketplace. So welcome, Paulette. So glad you're here, and take it away. Thanks for being here.
Jean, thank you so much first for the invitation and for letting your community know that we had something we'd like to share for our collective benefit. And Jean, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your professionalism and your tech ability, and that we were just going to pull this out of the hat no matter what was going on. And I was confident that between us we would do that. So we appreciate the time that folks who are on the live call today are making to share with us. We're going to be going through a variety of things that can be done with your expertise. So it's not a question of researching anything other than your mind and your memory, your personal memory, not even your computer memory. And the ideas that I will be sharing with you come from a background of 28 years of being in this business. So sooner or later, I will get it right. I mention this to you because, like anyone who's been around the block for more than just a little bit, we've found the potholes so that we can help other people get to a success level faster than those of us who figured it out on our own. And we will have time for questions and answers today, so that anything that you've got that may not necessarily be as clear as you'd like it, we will make some time at the end for Q&A. And Jean, let's go to the first substantive. Yeah. People often hear about the idea that a book is the only way to create any real professional credibility. Yet we know that some folks have written books or are writing one or more right now, or they have said that always favorites, someday I'll write a book, and they're still saying that and they haven't gotten it yet. Or, like me, there's lots of folks who can't even imagine ever writing a book in this or any other lifetime. There's no right answer here. Wherever you are on your journey, today I'm going to show you that you may decide to write a book after all because I'm going to make it easier for you, or you may decide to stick with can't imagine ever writing a book, and there will be definitely other easier, quicker ways to share your knowledge, expand your reach of helping people while very quickly expanding the bottom line and expanding the revenue that you bring in. So while the commonly held knowledge is a book is the only way, I tend to be a trailblazer. It just is how I'm wired. So I don't believe a book is the only way. It is one of several. Let's go on to the next. And
so I'd actually love to just add on here, Paulette. If I would love to know from you, if you're here live today or if you're watching later, where are you at on this continuum? Like, have you written a book? Are you writing a book? Where are you at the someday maybe I'll write a book, or can't imagine ever writing one? Like, I'd love to know. Go ahead and share that in the chat. So I'll let
Thanks,
you go on,
Jean. Yeah, I appreciate you jumping in on that one. So someone has written 2 books and is also an editor. Darlene, thank you. And my plan is to make my PhD dissertation a book proposal or the first draft. Okay. Thank you, Vidya. Anybody else want to jump in on this and share where you are? There's no right answer. There's no shame. We just want to know where we can focus to help you best. Okay, either folks are typing slowly or they'd prefer not to jump in. That's fine either way, no problem. And Vidya, your mixed media project, yeah, this definitely will speak to mixed media for sure. Okay, so let's go on now. The purpose for writing a book. It's important to know why you want to write a book if in fact you do want to write a book. Whether you are in the someday maybe I'll write a book, or you are about to write your next book or your first book. In some industries, there's an expectation. In academia, for sure, publish or perish. The expert credibility speaks louder in certain professions and in certain industries than other. The idea of generating revenue, the intent to be on the bestseller list, and to differentiate yourself. And Karen, thank you for jumping in that you write articles and blog posts. That counts plenty. The reason for writing a book matters a lot because your reason may be able to be attained in an easier, less expensive in time and money way to do it. Certainly everyone I've ever had the honor and privilege of working together with has been bright. In fact, sometimes that has been more of a deterrent than, or more of an obstacle than a help. Smart, creative, lots of ideas. Never, ever is there a problem of having enough content. So we'll go on and see what we can do in that kind of situation of you've got the content and where do we go? So you've got, and I'm continuing to repeat this for a reason, you've got the content. That's never been a problem for me in anything that I've ever dealt with people. The challenge has been which content to use. So if you think you don't have enough content, I'd like to shine a light on some things that you personally may not be labeling as content, and yet from a different pair of eyes and ears, those personal chats you have, whether they are at a professional gathering or a social gathering, the inevitable question of what do you do and what do you do? And once that's revealed, it can be tempting to immediately shift into professional gear, professional mode, and especially when I was a professional organizing consultant and productivity expert, people would say, gee, could I use you? And at that point, 2 or 3 tips easily just automatically come out of your mouth about what you do with a pile of paper. And the articles that you write and distribute, we have somebody already on this call who does write articles. That's content that can be repurposed very readily and turned into direct revenue. When you're speaking to audiences, no matter whether it's a live performance that you are in front of face-to-face in front of your audience, or whether you're on a Zoom webinar like we are here, or the books that you wrote and are writing, all of that content can easily become a challenge of what to actually pull from that, because you've got stuff you forgot you had. Have you ever read an article and thought, boy, this sounds really great. This kind of sounds like me. And then you notice that it's your byline, that you did write that article, but you happen to forget about the fact that you wrote that, and there you are. I've done that, and I've had a lot of colleagues and friends find that's happened too. So you've got things in your memory, in your head, and in your memory on your computer that you can access. Let's move ahead now as far as where that content goes, as far as a formula that I inadvertently created and didn't recognize it in hindsight. And it is a very simple yet powerful formula. And it goes like this. Write one sentence starting with a positive verb, an action word, telling the reader what to do, not what not to do, but what to do. The next sentence explains why or how. Ideally, it's 25 to 40 words. That tip just now is 28 words. It told you very directly what to do, and then it told you why or how. If you find yourself starting with a negative verb of don't do this or avoid that, ask yourself what it is you want the reader or listener to do. Certainly many people that I know, including the person in the mirror for me, has been challenged with weight issues throughout life. I know what to eat that feeds and fuels his body. However, if somebody just says to me, don't do this, don't do that, don't the other thing, all I'll be left with is eating dirt. So you really will serve your people best by sharing what to do. And I encourage you heartily to use second person when you're talking directly to the reader or listener. That means using you and your rather than I, my, we, or our. And talk to one person, not the entire group. By using you or your rather than all of you, it personalizes and has a lot more power and credibility. So now here's the really official sample tip from my booklet, 110 Ideas for Organizing Your Business Life, which, by the way, I personally sold well over 1 million copies of that one booklet in various formats and languages without spending a penny. So I've done a little bit of work in the trenches on this. Here's a sample tip for real, the very first tip in my booklet. Use a spiral notebook to capture random ideas, to-do lists, and phone conversation notes. That's a very direct sentence to tell the reader or listener what to do. The notebook creates reliability and is far superior to the back of an envelope. Again, 28 words, and yet you're thinking maybe about those Post-it notes or the scraps of paper or the back of an envelope that you're sure you're going to find when you need it, and probably not. So that has saved lives, that particular tip, where a high-level executive is on the phone with someone that they gave a proposal to, and they need to resurrect what the details were that they promised. If it's in a spiral notebook, it's just flipping a few pages rather than looking like someone who is really not well organized and doesn't have their act together enough to have the credibility to do business with. So when I say that saves lives, I'm not joking. We'll go on to the next. And the value of these tips, I cannot impress strongly enough on you that the best way to serve your audience is to start with basic information. It serves any of these purposes, as I've discovered. It can be brand new information, no matter how much you think everybody knows it, they don't. It can be a reminder of forgotten knowledge. They had it, but they didn't have a recent use to keep it forward in their mind. Or it can be confirmation that they know what a perceived expert knows, that they puff their chest out with lots of great feel because this expert just confirmed that what I've been doing forever is a good way to do it. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that a big obstacle can be being so knowledgeable and being such an expert. However, the challenge there is to think back on when you had your first experiences with the knowledge you've got now. The most basic level will accomplish one of those three things that I just mentioned of new information, and I'll give you an example on that one in particular. I was talking with my closest friend not long ago, and we were chatting just as friends, and I said to her that I had only recently discovered that white vinegar was a cleaning agent. Now, I'm a mature adult. I'm a baby boomer. I've been around for a while. But that piece of knowledge never came to me. My mother, her strong suit was not necessarily house cleaning, so she didn't know that. So she couldn't teach it to me. Now, as intelligent as I cop to being, I didn't know that particular detail. There's lots of examples like that in each of our lives. So doing the most basic tips to start with, not only is that good for serving your clients, it's good for serving your business, because you can go back and give the next more advanced level in whatever you do in product development for your business, the next step, whether, regardless of what delivery format it turns out to be. And as you saw, it's a very simple formula as far as these tips are concerned. So we'll move ahead and talk about uses for your expertise. Before I do that, I do want to give you one more example. No need to go back to the slide. But as far as keeping it to less is more, there's an example that I like to share with people about that. A financial planner who I was chatting with thought that the best way that she could serve her prospects and current clients was to produce a book that included every single solitary financial product that existed at the time. She thought that would be a great way to serve the people that she served. Well, you can imagine that that was going to end up being somewhere between 500 and 700 pages. For someone who is first coming into learning how to invest their money from a position of the only thing they really know is how to balance their checkbook of deposits and withdrawals, that is going to cause somebody to turn on their heel and run as fast as possible away from that person who is sharing too much. Imagine a first date that the other person is telling you everything about their life prior to meeting you. Too much information is not enticing. So I encourage you heartily that less is more. Yeah, one of those examples is going to resonate with everybody, I'm sure. So use this for your expertise. Simultaneously or individually, your expertise can serve as marketing tools, new direct income streams for you, especially if you are someone whose business is primarily service-oriented. You can use your expertise within a book you are writing, whether it ends up being chapter summaries or whether it ends up being an outline to flesh out for a book. Either way, it can have direct relationships to a book. And as I see at the end here, the book outline, online and offline. Everything that I'm going to be talking with you about today can be done online or offline. It can be delivered digitally, or it can be delivered fully produced, printed. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we proceed. Talking about different delivery methods, online and offline. The items that in the first three that are on the left of each bullet is really what the content is doing. The audio, it can be a printed CD and an MP3. So either way, there are still people who want the physical product. They may not be millennials. However, there are still CD decks or CD players in cars. There are still CD players that people use when they're doing this thing. I think it's called jogging. There are still opportunities to use a CD or to download an MP3 to listen to when they've got the time. Booklet can be either in print or PDF. And for many years, until the past year of my life, I led with tips booklets. And people started to say to me, well, are people actually even printing anything anymore? And yes, they are. And it depends on who your audience is and what the purpose is they want to use it for. So, yeah, it's print and PDF that's available. No need to have a large inventory that you're storing. But yes, print is still a viable delivery method depending on the recipient and how it's utilized. The tips individually, you can put a tip per card of a deck of cards. And I know that any of you on this particular call, whether you're listening live or you're listening to the replay, know a lot about card decks. Thank you, Jean. Drip a tip subscription. That can be a product that you create that is delivered by email. And that tip can be either text or audio or both. And you can fatten out that package to be able to charge more for it by adding other elements to a subscription package. So we can go from one end, bare bones minimum of just dripping a tip by email. And Karen says that she's creating flashcards too for future students. Excellent. And we'll talk about the future students in a moment. You can also use that content specifically without it being formatted at all. It can be delivered as a Word document to an entity that wants to use it in some interesting ways that in the next slide or two I'll be getting to, but I want to just give you a teaser on that. So even without producing into any physical format or even into any designed downloadable format, you've got something that you can definitely sell. And I'll tell you soon what that is. So let's keep going. Your audience. This is one of my company's differentiators. The first year that I was in business, by the way, I had no clue what I was doing when I created my tips booklet back in 1991. In the dark ages of 1991, pre-internet, pre-lots of things. So that affected how I was doing my business. The first year, and by the way, I didn't have two nickels to rub together, which is also an important factoid in this. So at that time, I was a professional organizer, and the sales cycle for consulting and speaking work had gotten slower and slower. And I had created these two habits called eating and paying the rent. And I wasn't keen on breaking either of those habits. So as the universe has a wonderful way of doing, someone showed me a tips booklet on how to improve your business communications. And I looked at that, and very glibly, as a former East Coaster, I said, I could do one of those on organizing tips. Threw it in the drawer, forgot about it for about 6 months. Things did not improve, and I said, where's that tips booklet? Now, mind you, I had no clue what I was going to do. However, I'm a firstborn, so I'm a natural trailblazer, and if it's not there, I'll figure it out, which in fact is what I did. So I did, at that point, 110 ideas for organizing your business life. And at the time, interestingly enough, I happened to be dating a printer. However, he had not sharpened his cutting blade in forever. So when I asked him and he agreed to do a very short print run, I think it was 100 copies, there were no 90-degree angles any place on those corners. So I had to go forward. At any rate, the first year, what I did to sell my tips booklet was I would send a copy of the booklet and a cover letter to every editor of any magazine that was even remotely a possibility to excerpt from my booklet into their articles that they would write, as long as they agreed to put my contact information and the price. I started at $3 a piece, and I took this gigantic risk and went up to $5 a piece. I was getting tubs of envelopes from the post office every day with money in them. The first year, I sold 50,000 copies one at a time. One at a time. Now, that was like manna from heaven for me because I was coming out of a financial desert at that point. Not only was it wasn't huge money, but it was enough to make me feel a whole lot better. But the bigger reward was there were opportunities there were opportunities to do things that either I didn't think of, or I didn't have direct access, or I didn't know how to use the access. That last one was crucial because at the time, I had amazing access to all kinds of major manufacturers of office supplies. At that point, I was the national president of the National Association of Professional Organizers. The downside of that was I had never lived in a corporation, so I didn't know what was standard operating procedure or language speak or any of that, and I only had one product. So that conversation was, do you want to buy it or not? 50-50 chance that I'd make a sale, rather than which of these is our starting point when you've got multiple products. So one of the things that happened, and this is a long tail story that I've given you to make a point here. One of the envelopes, I'm going through the envelopes and taking the money out before I hand them off to a high school kid that I had hired. I didn't want to tempt the high schooler because there was green money in some of those envelopes. So I would hand them off to her, and she would do the lick and stick and stuffing and data entry after I took the money out. So I'm going through $5, $5, $5, $1,000, $5. Wait a minute. What was this? So I'm pretty good about identifying target market. In a million years, I never, ever, ever would have thought of where that $1,000 check came from. It was an electrical manufacturer's rep firm in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Now, I promise you, I never, ever would have come up with that one. However, his check went right through my checking account beautifully. No prob. I called him because I wanted to know what he thought he was buying. He said he bought a single copy from one of the publicity excerpts in the magazine that he had seen, and he thought what a great idea that would be for that year's holiday greeting to his clients and prospects. And because it was so generic, it crossed party lines of all kinds of industries. It was how to organize your business life. So he said to me, Paulette, could we get our company name and our phone number printed on the cover? Like I said, this was pre-internet. I said, sure. I don't see any reason why we couldn't. I didn't know how it was going to be done, but I figured I could do that. So then he said to me, and I've got a question. I don't know how you feel about it, but could we leave your name and your contact information in there? And I thought for a quarter of a second, then I went, yeah, that'll be fine. He's reaching 2,500 people that I wouldn't have reached otherwise. And yes, indeed, I did make other sales from recipients of what he sent out. So when I looked at that whole experience, I said, gee, this is a different way to fly, completely different business model, selling in large quantities, imprinting with the company information. It often turns into placing recurring orders, which is sometimes known as a continuity program. Karen, thank you very much for that compliment, that she and her husband think I'm cute. I'll accept that any day of the week. Thank you. The people that you are selling to are usually used to purchasing promotional products. These booklets and other delivery formats straddle that line of promotional products and publishing. So you want to know all the products and they want to know all the products and services that you offer, because if the first one looks good, you've made their life immeasurably easier. They can do one big fat check mark off to marketing plan for this calendar or fiscal year, because you've got enough that if they're doing a quarterly offer of gift with purchase, even when they sign up for your buyer's newsletter, and they want to give a bonus to that person who signed up, it can be a PDF of the content of your booklet. Second quarter of the year, they can be an audio. Third quarter of the year, it can be a card deck. Fourth quarter of the year can be bundled if it's a calendar year and it's holiday season time. So you made life so much easier. You've allowed your buyer to differentiate themselves because they are giving out something that is educational, but also has their name on it. So it's a promotional product that is not a consumable necessarily. It's going to stay around and keep your buyer's company name in front of them, and in a way that is not going to be an imprinted pen that somebody walks off with, or a rubber ball to be able to de-stress people who are a little bit tense. Now, buying in large quantity, produced, delivered to the shipping dock is one way to serve the companies and associations. We can move forward now and talk a little bit more about serving that audience. You can create and license a 52-tip manuscript, which is what I was referring to earlier about having a manuscript that is saleable. Licensing, my quick, easy definition of that is you are renting the use of your content in exchange for payment. An easy way to grasp that concept is if you own an apartment building, you are renting out each of those spaces in exchange for payment, and it's under certain terms, and you and the renter have signed an agreement, a formal agreement. Same thing happens here with licensing your content, and there's lots of ways to license. So if you are looking for a way to generate revenue, and usually it's pretty good money, 4 or 5 digits. I actually have a colleague who told me recently that she's got a client who did a licensing deal, and it was in the tech business. So those numbers generally tend to be pretty high to begin with. But she had a client who had a licensing agreement where someone paid a 6-digit amount of money to license a certain percentage of that person's blog. I love deals like that. They do exist. They are possible. Yes, you have to do it yourself. This is not something in this specific regard that you can immediately send someone representative in on your behalf. You've got to do in the trenches first so that you can train someone to do it for you if that's your pleasure at a certain point. So which companies want your expert content to help sell more of their own products and services? It can be in their newsletter. That's not an unusual model at all, where someone has produced lots of newsletters. I know someone on this call already said that they write articles. It may be that some entity, an association or a company, wants to license your articles to put into their newsletter for a fee, with a written agreement. It can be on their website that they want to use your content. It can be on their product packaging or in their advertising. I've got a funny story to tell you about that last one in their advertising. Early on in my journey, again, remember I was a professional organizer, I thought it would be great to talk to somebody high up the ranks in marketing or sales at Staples, the office supply store. And at that point, I was not as confident as I have become over the years because I wasn't as experienced as I got to be, plain and simple. I had a bad case of phone paralysis for about 2 hours. I would go right up to the last digit of the phone, dialing it for the VP of marketing, and I'd stop. For 2 hours, I did this insanity. Finally, I had a good talk with myself, and I said, this is really ridiculous. So I let it go through, and of course, the universe plays wonderful practical jokes. When I let it go through all the way, the person I was trying to reach was out for the day. So I didn't end up talking to that person after all. The kind of thing I had in mind to suggest to them was they've already got radio advertising that they're paying for. So this is not an increase in their ongoing budget. To suggest to them using this organizing moment brought to you by Staples, using my content to plug into their 15 or 30-second spot on radio during morning drive time. That's the kind of thing that you can do with your content. Once you identify who will best utilize it and has the money and is willing to pay for that use. And I never do any exclusive licenses. And should we decide to work together at some point in any capacity, I will be more than willing and happy to share with you the whole background and the essence of how to do a licensing agreement. It does not have to be particularly unique content either. I had someone who had very generic information, as was mine, by the way. It does not need to be the cure to cancer. It does not need to be a proprietary formula that you have developed. So anybody who may be noticing that self-talk, I encourage you to say thank you and let go of that. Moving on to the next slide. When I have ever approached or had conversations with nonprofits, I have experienced a conversational pattern that goes something like this. We have no money. Hello, my name is. Because that's the mindset that I have experienced with quite a few nonprofits. So what I've chosen to do, I've learned to do, I've taught myself to do, is to acknowledge that I heard them by merely saying, yes, I understand. And then I go into some options for them to find some money from people who would also benefit, and that would be sponsors. So in this particular example that I've got here, this organization, as a 501c3 nonprofit, is an organization that created a proprietary, unique system on how to better clean school buildings. And it was a costly formula of what they do, and that was what they sold to school systems. So when they heard about my work, they came to me and they said, we'd like to create a booklet that is how-to tips that we can use basically as a marketing tool to hand out to custodial staffs and the decision makers at school systems. Give it out free because we really want to sell them the system. And in this situation, they had vendors that sold the equipment that went with the system. And those vendors had everything to gain by having brand awareness for these custodial staffs and school systems. So what you see here is on the back cover, which is on the left side of this graphic, that there are two different companies that foot the bill for producing this booklet. And everybody was happy. So when someone comes to you and says, we have no money, hello, my name is, they may have donors, they may have vendors, they may have other members that will benefit and are happy to fund the production and the proposal of doing whatever product it is that you are thinking of doing. And again, this is something that I can walk people through, and I frequently do when we've got some kind of a consulting arrangement going on, or even a 1 hour kind of a situation. So moving along to another example right along with this, one of the vendors decided that it was not going to be any skin off their nose to have $100 less profit from people who were purchasing some of the equipment. So they included right within the binding of the booklet this coupon for a $100 rebate. And that was fine as well. So moving ahead, we are now looking at alternatives for speakers or consultants, which I have a guess that some of you may be. And you've run into a situation where the decision maker says, we have no budget to hire you to speak or consult at this moment. Again, yes, I understand, which merely means you heard them. And keep in mind that how-to content frequently fits a budget that's different, a different budget line item or a different budget than the budget that's allocated for hiring you as a speaker or a consultant. And that the products, even when they buy a substantial quantity, may be less costly than your speaking or consulting fee. And your content is going to last longer. Your client is paying you to market you internally. So some department manager may say, gee, this information is really valuable. I wonder what I've got now in my budget to bring this person in to work with our department. So your content, your presence lasts longer, even if that's the first time you get your foot in the door. And it is, which of these is our starting point? Which of the products, or consulting, or speaking? And in that way, those decision makers realize your flexibility to serve them, and you become a real darling. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about content development as well. And let's go to the next one. I quickly gave you a throwaway comment about recurring continuity programs. There's a variety of ways that you can create a relationship, an ongoing relationship with your buyers, rather than a one-night stand. I personally feel each has value, but, you know, relationship definitely is something that lends to more warm fuzzies, to keep that analogy going. The products, usually a recurring continuity program relationship happens after the first purchase. So the first purchase is a test to see how effective and how well it's been received. Did the intention of the buyer match the expectations of the buyer? If it got anywhere close to it, if they're not coming back to you to discuss a continuity program, it's up to you to follow up with them. Just a hi, how are you? Checking to see how things are going. Got some other ideas, and go on from there. Now, when I said there's multiple ways that you can create an ongoing program, it can be either the same product is on a standing delivery of the order. X number of units of the booklet, 10,000 copies every quarter. The buyer doesn't want to have to store them, but they are more than willing to accept and pay for delivery 4 quarters out of the year, or every other month, every month, because they love that product so much. Or they may say, let's do a monthly arrangement, and this is the product I want to do the first month, this is the product I want to do the second month, and like that. And they have locked themselves into a year-long agreement with you, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, who among us wouldn't like to have that kind of a cash flow? And I have created that and have assisted in creating that with clients of mine. So that is something that it is very possible is new information to you, that you may have been focusing on one copy, one at a time, to one person at a time. It's not a bad thing to do that. It's just a different way to do that. And you get to choose which business model gets you most psyched and proceed. You can do both. You know, that's like the airplane tickets that the person sitting next to you paid 4 times the amount you paid. And in fact, you paid it by points. You didn't even pay it by cash. But you're both going from point A to point B. Nothing wrong with either of those business models. You get to choose. So this is a product sheet, like a one sheet in the speaking world, where it shows you what the various products are. It does not have prices on it because there's quantity pricing. There's other variables that affect the pricing as to how much they want it customized. I've seen minimal customization. I've seen customization of just about every page where they wanted their brand name stuck on every page someplace. So I've seen company history in a 0 point size that you could barely read, to the point of who cared. But my mantra has been, for money, honey, you can have almost anything you want. And I learned about putting that word almost in there. So there's lots and lots of flexibility. Moving along as we're headed into the home stretch here, short-term course based on tips content that can renew for advanced information. You can deliver that online, offline, in person, live, or on demand. I personally have not done this. I have seen quite a few of my clients do it. The short-term courses can work if you are dealing mostly corporate and you've got contacts who love you already. And it's not a matter of having to do a lot of education before they buy the product. I offer that as a possibility without any leaning one way or the other. The next thing we're doing is rinse and repeat. Everything I've said to you up until now, the assumption has been the English language. Everything I have said to you up until now, rinse and repeat in any other language. Let's say your large quantity buyer wants to reach an Hispanic audience. You can be the savior. You can be the partner in this situation by saying, we can get whatever you want translated into the language you want to reach those people. So this is definitely a situation of building onto things as you go. What I have shared with you today does not need to be, you wake up tomorrow, add water, stir, and boom, you've got a 9-product line. Next week is soon enough, but you don't have to do that all at once. You can do the manuscript first, start selling that while you're then generating more revenue if you need more revenue to go forward, to then get things produced, whether it is just the digital version without printing or with the printing. So everything you've done goes into other languages. Who is their community? A bank, for instance. A bank, and certainly all the spirituality in the world that Jean introduces to you within or enhances what you're already doing with that spiritual bent. It's not uncommon these days to find corporate and association decision makers who are very receptive to the metaphysical leaning, the spiritual leaning, and they want to reach a community that's not native English speakers. So you create these things as needed and on your buyer's money. You'll take at least a deposit, if not full payment, to initiate the sale. Moving along, again, into the home stretch, we've just got a little bit more. Who else can you suggest that your buyer wants to reach? Help your client expand their reach with your suggestions. You end up being very helpful that way, and they want to know more. Please consider cultural sensitivities. Nothing worse than a translation turning into something literally obscene or crass. So be aware of that by doing a double-blind translation from English into the other language, and then from that other language back to English by somebody who never saw the original. That will save your tail and your sale, so, and your reputation in something that could be a real gold mine. So today what we've covered is convert your content to cash, and I am going to take a wild guess that there are ideas that you just hadn't had any reason to think about before. So now you've got lots and lots of ideas, and the question is, where do you start first? Do you want to do a book if you haven't done one? Or do you realize you could get a 52-tip manuscript done probably by tomorrow without straining your brain that much? Remember, you're going back into your memory. You're not researching anyplace else. The purpose for creating, what is your purpose for creating a how-to product? Is it to do more good in the world and also to generate revenue? One of those motivators may be stronger for you than the other. No judgment at all. Just be aware so that you can be authentic and true to yourself. Use your content for marketing and new revenue simultaneously, regardless of what your strongest motivator is. You've got the multiple delivery formats that you can do from one manuscript before you go on and do another series from a different manuscript. Be aware now that you have the opportunity to shift gears with who your audience is. Would you love to have 4, 5, and 6-digit checks coming in? And by the way, at that point, if you can avoid taking a credit card payment, 3% matters when you're taking in bigger amounts like that, the 3% transaction fee. So I generally guide people to suggesting that they voice that as their preferred payment on these larger amounts, that it's a check. And if it means sale or no sale, of course you'll suck it up and accept the credit card. Lots of other ways to do that. And again, we can talk if it's something that you are interested in moving forward on. So, Jean, one more time, I think we're coming up on the last. Yeah, what's your next choices? Get this done quickly and easily, or get it done for you? My business model has now changed to done for you services, which you will see at tipsproducts.com. Tipsproducts.com. And I'm also going to send you a bonus gift as well as the recording of this session. The bonus is going to be 15 questions to ask yourself before creating a tips product. And that will have my contact information on there as well. So choose the starting point that's best for you. No right answer. Jump into the deep end of the pool or the shallow end of the pool. Wherever it is, just start. People used to ask me when I was a musician in my first career, what was the most difficult instrument? And they thought that the violin was probably, by reputation. And I said, any instrument is the hardest. Getting started is the difficulty. Even my piano playing friends told me that just flipping that lid over the keys very often was literally and metaphorically the hardest thing to do about playing that instrument. So getting started, and we can get started as soon as you're ready. So with all of that, I'd like to open this up. I appreciated a couple of the comments that I was able to catch out of the corner of my eye when I was on a roll talking with you. Vidya says, if you are a Texas Longhorns fan, do not hook them horns in Italy. Okay, thank you very much for that. Karen, again, thank you very much. Your question about how much do you sell them for, it depends on the quantity and the other variables that I quickly mentioned. So no two sales are likely to be at the same price. And the more you sell per sale, the lower the quantity, the unit price is, like anything else you buy wholesale. Any other questions or comments anyone has? No time to be shy, I promise you.
No, I loved all of this information. You really jam-packed this, Paulette. And I was thinking of one right near the very beginning where you talked about, text and audio. Gosh, you gave so many great tips. I took lots of notes today.
Oh, good. Well, in the meantime, Karen asked a question. Karen was talking about my very first tips, and I don't know what PHABLET is. It's a booklet or it's a pamphlet, but I only call them booklets, by the way. That's my branding. I only ever did one booklet for my own business, by the way. Only one. And then I figured out ways to modify it, change it, not the content, but delivery formats. I sold it first for $3, and then I took that big risk and bumped it up to $5. If you have content that's pretty generic, that is a fine number. If you have a self-image and enough confidence to bump it up higher and you think that your market will take that, great. However, I strongly encourage you to not have single copies as your primary focus. It's a lot of labor. It's a lot of work to get much money out of it for your efforts. I really encourage you to sell in bulk. And for me, with the booklets, 100 booklets is a short run, is a small amount, because most of those went as samples to decision makers. Those of you who are speakers and the commonly held thing of back of the room sales, I understand that is expected. Sure, go ahead and do that. However, again, if you really want to reach a lot more people and you want to make substantially more money for your efforts, I encourage you to take a look at the whole idea of selling in bulk. Jean,
Yeah,
did you find that question that you wanted to
yeah,
ask?
no, it'll pop up for me. We'll maybe send it out in a follow-up email, answer more questions, right? But
Yeah,
I just wanted to kind of add to that too. When my husband wrote his first book, even he sold it in book. That's in bulk. That's the only way he ever sold it.
yeah.
Although it was sold in the bookstore, he sold 40,000 copies
Mm-hmm.
from selling it in bulk to related
Bookstores are the worst place to sell books because they are returnable, so you never knew if you actually made a sale that stuck. And the ones that get returned are rarely saleable again because a lot of these have cafes and the coffee got spills on them. I also want to add one other example as far as the difference between serving your audience well or not. At one point, I had a rabbi for a client, and he had advanced training in grief counseling, and he wanted to write a book that was provided to people on what the appropriate procedures were in an observant Jewish household when someone died. And I said to him, you know, a book is not what somebody's going to read when they are in mourning and it's still raw. I said that would be the perfect setting for a tips booklet of what to do and the sequence. I said that book, I would sooner suggest you go to funeral homes and any other services related to when someone has died, for them to use that as a marketing tool and an educational piece to make known their existence and their service. So that's a pretty profound example of when a book, no matter how well it was written or how much good information it's got in it, is not timed right for that moment. And that booklet absolutely is.
So I'm curious. That's really a cool example, Paulette. I really love
Yeah.
that. And so I'm curious of if you're listening to us live here today, what do you have some ideas? Like what would your how-to booklet be on? Like, do you have some ideas already, like brewing around in your head? Or I'm kind of curious what has really inspired you today. Like, what part of this? There were so many great tips. I really love the licensing piece. That's really exciting. Sponsors and vendors, yes, that's really cool. And I think you hit on it, Paulette, on that really the most difficult spot of actually picking up the phone and calling them, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, it was. I mean, I spoke with somebody earlier this week who got referred to me as a potential client, and he had 27 years worth of experience at IBM selling. I said, you have no clue how far ahead of the game you are, both with corporate speak and with your sales skills. So, yeah, I mean, that's real valuable stuff.
Beautiful.
And for those of you that don't, it's not that difficult to learn. And I've learned not to say the word sales or marketing to people who respond negatively to that. You know, go visit with those folks. Share with them what you've got and how it can be helpful. Now, I didn't say the word sell or market in that example just now. And that really, truly was honest and truthful. That go visit with them and share what you've got that can be helpful for them.
Well, beautiful. Absolutely. And so thank you so much for coming, Paulette. And if you have, Karen has some things to share, trouble applying this to your business.
Karen has a question. I'm having trouble applying this to my business. Oh, I love challenges like this. Let's see. I'm hoping stuff will occur to me later in the shower. Yeah, I've been to that party. I'm basically a counselor using ancient astrology, and it's tough sometimes coming up with blog posts. have to go through my stuff and see if I can package it differently. Karen, you may want an hour of my time. I can see possibilities to share with you as far as packaging, as far as possible client bases to go to. So that's the kind of thing I can't go into enough depth to serve you adequately in this environment. And I have a feeling you probably can understand that. So if at some point you'd like to schedule a consult, okay, yes, you go to my site. And on the services there, you'll see strategic planning session. Thank you very much. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Well, it's the same for me. Well, I should probably unmute my video too. Hold on. There we are. Well, it's kind of the same as
okay.
for me. I'm a transformational life coach, or and so the people I serve is not necessarily. So on one hand, yes, if I'm approaching a business or a corporation, then it's as a speaker. That's really what I'm targeting. I want them to hire me as a speaker, not. So again, I'm just in that same space where I'm going, okay, how do all these parts and pieces fit into the framework of what I do? Where do I connect the dots? And it just has to percolate down and stew a little before the crock pot which is cauldron.
Yeah,
potion.
You have experienced what I teach people not to do. I have given you so much today to think about that the first step didn't jump out at you automatically yet. So that's not on you. Okay, that's not on you. You are very focused. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I kind of missed a little part there. You said first.
Okay, I said
blank.
You are experiencing what I teach people not to do. I gave you so much information today that I didn't serve you well, so that the first obvious thing for you just jumped out and said, yeah, this is what I want to do. So it may be that when you choose to listen to a replay of this, that may help. Or as I suggested to our other friend here, Karen, you may find that, I will speak slower and that we can connect the dots for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. It needs time. It was a lot of information to take in, though I absolutely loved the first part. I'm all about process. So I'm like, okay, that how-to formula is perfect. And I actually have a document that I can apply that to right away. So one thing did jump out at me straight up. I was
okay.
Like, that.
Good.
And apply to a tip sheet I have and refine that and actually work that up a little better. And I'm actually going to be presenting the content next month. So it ties in beautifully there. But
Good.
The rest of it, yes, there's a lot to sort of process and analyze and synthesize and work through and sift through. It'll come. I'm never in any rush.
Okay, Vidya. Well, you know how to find me when and if you'd like to. Jean, thank you so much for hosting today and for your input, your invaluable input. And I look forward to reconnecting with anyone at the time that it may be right. Have a great day and evening, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.